residency at the Montefiore Medical Center in the Bronx. His interest in pediatric nutrition and complex GI problems led him to pursue a pediatric GI and nutrition fellowship at the Morgan Stanley Children's Hospital of New York at Columbia University, formerly known as Baby's Hospital.
Right.
It was there where Dr. Turkish developed a strong interest in studying dyslipidemia, that means bad fats, at the genetic and molecular level. He has obtained numerous grant awards, published his data in several scientific journals, and continues to collaborate with colleagues at Columbia. In addition, for caring for patients with inflammatory bowel disease and other pediatric GI problems, noticeable a lot in the Jewish community, Dr. Turkish has a particular interest in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and dyslipidemias in children. He will be happy to answer questions after he speaks.
Thank you for inviting me. So I'm going to talk about problems that basically one is of epidemic proportion at this point, and one which is a problem which we're seeing more and more of actually in the pediatric world, and that's cholesterol problems. I used to think that cholesterol problems were just in older, people who just by aging and with time having cholesterol problems, but this is a problem that we're seeing more and more of in pediatric population. It's not just from obesity; it's actually a genetic problem that we're detecting now. So I'm just going to flip quickly through the obesity slides. Just for your knowledge, some definitions. We basically, when we're looking at somebody's weight, we're looking at it compared to somebody's height in a child or an adult. And we use what's called the body mass index, which is basically a measure of body fat based on the height and the weight that applies to adult men and women. But we also use it in kids, depending on their age and development. For your knowledge, our definitions of obesity is basically a body mass index, which is more than, say, 95% of children for that age, basically. Those who are, say, between 85 and 90% higher than the general population are considered to be overweight. All children all adults who have a body mass index of more than 95% should have a full, in-depth medical assessment to see if they're having any sequelae from being obese. And it's important for us, at least, to identify children who have a high body mass index, because in general, an overweight and obese child is going to become an overweight and obese adult. The ones who are overweight are at risk, and they also have to be watched very carefully. These are the consequences of obesity. There are many. In my world, basically, we see problems that are related to the liver. When the liver gets overloaded with fat, you can end up with gallstones. In young children, we're seeing high cholesterol, high triglycerides, problems with type 2 diabetes, meaning diabetes that's not insulin shots generally, but like having to take medications. This is all increasing at an extraordinarily rapid rate in the United States and in the world, for that matter. And there are many other problems within the lungs, and the heart, and the kidneys. And we're seeing children, basically, who are having many of the problems that you would think an adult would have who's obese, actually. And this is just, routinely we're seeing patients in the office with these problems. So I'm just going to flip through these quickly just to show you what's gone on over the last 25 years, okay? At least in adults. And, you could say it's sort of like it's proportional for children. But in 1987, you could see most states, they were in recording, like, whether or not patients were obese or not. But most states were less than 15% obesity. And as you go over the next 25 years, you can see how things basically change, where there's some states showing 15 to 20% obesity, half the states, now we're creeping into more than 20%, this is 1999, we keep going, 2003, 2008, where you're seeing some states more than 30% obesity, many states 25 to 29% of the adults are obese. This is from 2011, where at least half the states are claiming that, at least 25% of adults in those states are obese. So this obviously is why we're calling this an epidemic, basically. Prevalence of obesity in children and adolescents. At least 1 in 6 children in the United States are obese. 30% are at least overweight. Here's the costs. This is what we're all interested in, right? This is what everybody's talking about. So in 1998, the cost of obesity was $78.5 billion a year, and it basically took up 6.5% of the medical costs in this country. And then this is from 6 years ago, so I don't even have the numbers from right now, but 6 years ago, almost doubled in terms of billions of dollars and took up 9% of the medical costs. So obviously it's probably higher than what we're talking about from 1998. So this is a very costly problem. There are many reasons, many ideologies, many causes, many things that go into how a child becomes obese. And it ranges from behaviors to what's happening at home with families, parenting styles, the community, the school, and in general in society, what's going on. What kind of advertisements are we exposed to? So the basic things, I'll just talk about the main reasons that we sort of talk about a lot. And the challenges that we have. One of them obviously is that healthy food costs more money now, right? The price of good food is going up all the time. The cost of processed foods and in general still is relatively cheap. So, and those foods also have very dense calories. So we're talking like, the family standing around potato chips, processed meats like the packaged sort of like cold cuts, and sort of cheeses also that may be high calories. High dense processed foods are cheaper and they're easier to get. And the other thing is that these foods also are generally more available. You go to Costco, you go to the supermarkets, you basically can get these foods very easily. It's hard to get healthy foods. The other thing is that we're not eating at home as much as we used to. 1970, 75% of people ate at home and 25% ate out in general. Now, 60% eating at home, 40% are eating out. When you eat out, you tend to eat more, you get bigger portions, you get higher caloric density, and so that's also contributing to the problem. Snacks. Snacks have grown exponentially in terms of size, and the number of snacks we're eating per day has increased a lot. And we've gone from basically 70% to over 90% of children who regularly snack. Portion sizes. 1955, 7-ounce McDonald's soda was considered a large. Now, a small is 16 ounces. If you go, we're not going in there anyway. But in general, if you go into any store, now you can get 64 ounces of Coke for 89 cents even. So obviously our portion sizes have become gigantic compared to what they used to be. The most common vegetable that's eaten by children, French fries and potato chips. And this is a study that just came out a couple of years ago, basically showing, regular sort of like intake of certain foods related to what happens with their weight. So if you're somebody who generally eats chips, fries, processed meats, unprocessed red meat, sweets, desserts, refined grains, you generally are going to gain weight. If you eat vegetables, nuts, whole grains, fruits, and yogurt, it actually goes the other way. Beverages, sugar-sweetened beverages, more than ever. And that definitely contributes, obviously, with increased weight. And we're not just talking about soda. We're talking about iced tea. We're talking about lemonade. We're talking about vitamin water, right? Vitamin water. They say vitamin water is healthy for you, right? Because it's got vitamins in it, it's got sugar in it. So you have to look at labels. We're not as active as we used to be. We don't do as much activity, we don't do as much exercise. We know that a sedentary lifestyle is a primary risk factor for cardiovascular disease, stroke, and death. So we're watching, obviously, more TV, or on our computers, or playing with our iPads, iPhones, exercising our thumbs, but not our bodies, actually. And the other problem is also that gym is not what it used to be also. We don't even count gym anymore as activity, because it's only like once or twice a week in schools now. The other problem is that our community design affects our activities. You used to be able to walk to school. I remember walking to Brooklyn College from Kings Highway. You used to be able to bike to school even when it was safe. Sometimes it's not safe, right? If you're in an urban area, or if you're in the suburbs, you can't walk to school. You're basically going to get in a car, you're going to get on a bus, you're going to take a train to work, things like that. That's sort of like where we're at this point. People used to be able to just walk to work. So this is also contributing to our relative inactivity to where we used to be. It's hard to get healthy food. They may not be readily available. Low-income, underserved communities have limited access to healthy foods. Rural communities have a high number of convenience stores. The local sort of like, newspaper stand, 7-Eleven. This is where you get basically a lot of high-calorie, high-sugary, kind of high-fat foods, basically. Sleep, media use, and obesity. So we don't sleep as well or as much as we used to, and the less you sleep, the more likely you're going to be overweight. There's studies that definitely show that. There's something about metabolism and not sleeping well or not sleeping enough. This is a biggie. So we're not even talking about this anymore. Now we're talking about how much time do you play on your iPad or phone, or how much time are you texting, or how much Xbox video games or computer use are you using, right? So it's not even as much TV anymore. Kids don't even watch as much TV as they used to when I ask them. It's unbelievable. But when you are doing these things, you're basically snacking. And so when you're snacking, it's mindless eating. You're just putting on extra calories. You're not even aware of it. These are biggies. The average 6-year-old has viewed 100,000 commercials. And most of those commercials are going to be for either cars, which they can't get, or food, which they can get. There are areas where there is progress, however, over the last couple of years. Mostly from initiatives from the local government. So New York City actually is down, -5.5% in terms of childhood obesity. Philadelphia, almost 5%. Mississippi, -13%, where there was a tremendous amount of obesity, and even California. So there are some areas where it's actually getting improved, just from sort of local grassroots efforts and local city and state sort of legislature. There are regulations over the last couple of years that have also helped somewhat. Fruits and vegetables offered every day of the week at school. Proper portion sizes are reviewed. They're limiting the calories based on the age of the child. In some places, they're trying to reduce saturated and trans fats, which we know are sort of the bad stuff, right? And the amount of sodium that's in the diet. It's still very difficult to help affect changes in school lunches because of cost and the speed at which the food has to be basically made. So a lot of it is still processed with high sodium. And then there are efforts, obviously, to change everything over to low-fat or fat-free milk in schools. The First Lady has made initiatives basically going throughout the country with her Let's Move initiative to sort of get kids to be more active. That's coming sort of at the federal level. State and city level, there's been some legislation. Obviously, we all know of the trans fat ban from Mayor Bloomberg and his attempt to basically ban the sale of non-diet soft drinks more than 16 ounces, which basically was thrown out. But still, there are attempts amongst other cities and states to basically try and make some effort to reduce the amount of calories that people are taking in. So in terms of children, there are some states that are basically banning sugar-sweetened beverages in the vending machines. New York City now is only basically water machines. Physical ed required in some states, and some schools are actually like screening children for their BMI. So in New York City, pre-2003, easy to find soda machines. And then, it was thought, hey, soda's no good. Let's basically change over to something that we think might be healthier. So the city basically made a contract with Snapple. So they put Snapple machines in the school. Lo and behold, though, Snapples, each one of these bottles basically has almost the same number of calories as a Coke. And so, unfortunately, when they sort of figured this out, they were already bound to a contract with Snapple. Now, basically, we're moving towards where it's basically water machines in schools. Just 1 second, fine. Yep. Okay. So treatment, gradual weight loss, exercise is obviously the most effective therapy. We just drill this home over and over and over again. There's some debate about vigorous versus moderate exercise. We try to encourage low fat, low glycemic, meaning basically low sort of simple carbohydrates, simple sugar things in the diet, high fiber diet. This is basically what I sort of like start with, because I'm not a nutritionist, but I can just give some basic recommendations to a family. So we basically go by these rules called 5-2-1-0. 5 stands for fruit and vegetables, at least 5 servings a day. And by serving, we're talking about a half a cup. The way to do it is you just have to present over and over and over again. And if you have very young children, that's the time when you mold them the most. You just have to put it in front of them, and you just have to keep doing it over and over again. Or you have to find some other creative ways to get them to eat it. Seinfeld's wife, she wrote a whole book on how to basically trick your kids into doing it. At this point, we're in a desperate stage. So we have to somehow get them somehow to eat more than what they're doing, okay? It's actually recommended 5 to 9 servings. The reason also is it's healthier, it lowers your cholesterol, it keeps you full. So you're not gonna feel the need to go running out to go eat, junk. Limiting screen time to basically 2 hours or less a day. And that's for anything that their eyes are just watching and any kind of thumb action that they're doing with their, eye, whatever it is. Okay. 1 hour of exercise a day. So we say 1 hour, but really what we mean is about 40 minutes 5 times a week. And that's pretty real exercise, aerobic exercise. Somehow get the kids involved in some kind of like exercise, community programs, something, swimming. 0 is basically any kind of like beverage that has any kind of sugar added to it. Just throw it in the garbage, do not bring it into the house. Encourage the kids not to pick it up at school. Don't drink chocolate milk, don't drink juice. Juice has sugar, okay? You don't need juice, all right? They already are overloaded with empty calories. They won't eat as well if they drink juice as well. So water, low-fat milk, 1% or skim milk is acceptable. But the sugar-sweetened drinks basically will account for a lot of kids 500 to 700 calories extra a day. We review portion sizes. Everybody kind of went home last year with this new sort of like, paper, like to show their mom and dad basically what we had been doing and what we'd like to do. Half the plate is supposed to be fruit and vegetable. 1/4 protein, meaning 1 piece of meat, whether that's 1 piece of chicken or 1 hamburger, 1 piece of fish, and in this corner, 1/4 starch. So 1 little ice cream scoop of brown rice, or a piece of whole wheat bread, or beans, things like that. All right? We don't have the whole plate full of meat or rice or fries. Okay? So we have to move from here to here. Got to get the family involved. So it's not just the kids, it's the parents. The number one influence on what the kids are eating in their diet is their parents. And so whatever the parents are eating, that's what the kids are generally going to grow up and eat. It's a lifestyle changes a whole entire family. So that's sort of the obesity part. Now the cholesterol issue I just want to bring up because it's something that we're seeing, that I see more, because this is what sort of I've taken on as sort of a little subspecialty within my own world. So cholesterol basically, is a fatty substance that basically can build up in your blood vessels. We all freak out about it. Over the time, it can lead to heart attacks and strokes. Some people know that there's a bad cholesterol that causes most of the problem. That's called the LDL. And there's also a good cholesterol that's called the HDL that may protect us if you have a very good high cholesterol, good cholesterol. Common causes of high cholesterol, we know being overweight does. So usually being overweight, you usually have a high total cholesterol and a high bad cholesterol. Then there's a condition that we're seeing now more and more because we're screening for it appropriately. And it's called familial hypercholesterolemia. Okay? It's associated with very, very high total cholesterol and bad cholesterol. Talking about total cholesterol in the 300-400 range, and bad cholesterol in the 200s even. What is this? What is familial hypercholesterolemia? So it's basically inherited. It's an inherited genetic cholesterol problem in families. Basically, child has very high cholesterol from birth, born with it. The reason why it happens is basically the liver, if you want to think about the liver, one of the things it does is it kind of like acts as a vacuum, sucks out the bad cholesterol out of your blood and then sort of helps get rid of it. Here there's a problem where it just can't get it out of your blood and it continues to circulate in your blood. Basically, people have very high bad cholesterols in 1 in 500 people. It's pretty common. It's pretty common. Close relatives have 50% chance of having it. And usually there's some kind of pattern in families of early heart disease or heart attack in individuals who are young. So you're like, wow, that guy's 32 and he had a heart attack. What's going on there? Or somebody gets admitted to the hospital and has to have like a stent put in at age 40, right? Or has to have bypass surgery at 38. You never even hear about that. Many times, it may be familial hypercholesterolemia. And it's treatable. It's treatable like any other cholesterol problem. Here we can show you it's more common than you think. It's actually 5 times as common as cystic fibrosis, which is pretty common. If you look at different populations now, 1 in 500 in the United States and Europe. You go down to South Africa and Ashkenazi Jews, it's 1 in 67. That's pretty common. That's a lot. This is just to show basically that half the people within the families have it. So if you have a family member, you're likely 50% that somebody else is going to have it. The problem with this disorder is that you end up developing hardening of the arteries and blockage of the arteries way earlier on in life because of the high cholesterol. And so we're talking about people who are developing hardening of the arteries, like atherosclerosis, and even having heart attacks at much earlier ages. Yeah, the risk is basically 20% higher in people who have this disorder of having a heart attack than those who don't have the disorder. So that's where sort of the American Academy of Pediatrics came in and basically revised the screening process. So when you bring your kids in for their general checkup, once they hit sort of 8, 9, 10, 11 years of age, your pediatrician is going to be screening them for cholesterol basically now. The reason is so we can identify and treat those kids who have this disorder earlier on in life in order to prevent them from developing heart disease later on and prevent death. So everybody gets screened between 9 and 11 and again later on and sort of before they go to college basically. If there are other family members who are high risk, like there's people in the family with diabetes or other problems, and maybe then other family members, hey, my grandfather had a heart attack at 45, or dad's got heart disease and he's young, they're actually going to get screened at about 2 years of age now in the office. These are just the numbers, just for your general. I don't know if you guys know your cholesterols, but more than 200 is considered to be high. Less than 170 is considered to be acceptable. These are pediatric numbers even too. The bad cholesterol, more than 130 is high. Less than 110 is acceptable. So the treatment options, again, diet changes. It's kind of like how we treat obesity also, with some little changes. So you try and limit the amount of saturated fat that's in the child's diet. We encourage them to eat something soluble fiber, which helps lower cholesterol. And that's basically fruits, vegetables, things that are derived from oats, oat bran, Cheerios, oatmeal, things like that. There are certain margarines that have plant cholesterols in them, like Benecol. If you go in this big supermarket, you'll see it way up in the top. in one of the shelves in the butter section because nobody sort of buys it. We encourage them to increase their activity, reduce their inactivity, exercise, just a healthier lifestyle so they don't become obese. And then eventually they do need to be on medicine in order to save their life. And so they basically take the same medications that a lot of people are taking for their cholesterol. Usually we'll start them after puberty, basically. And when you do put them on it and you reduce their cholesterol, the risk of heart disease is reduced to levels similar to the general population. So it's important to identify it and to then treat it in order to basically saving these children's lives. So just overall, obesity and lipid problems are very prevalent. They're increasing. The treatment is obviously through healthy lifestyle changes. New therapies are always being studied. All children have to be tested by 11 years. So make sure to screen for familial hypercholesterolemia. And the treatment is a combination of diet, exercise, and lifelong medication. Unfortunately, that's what we have at our disposal. So we're basically, there's right now a group of 3 of us. There's 2 pediatric gastroenterologists as well as a nurse practitioner. We're actually hiring another gastroenterologist to replace somebody else come July. We have 2 offices. One is at the hospital. The other one now is we have a sort of privater office, if you want to call it, in Maspeth, and we're opening up another office in Bayside in April or May. These are our phone numbers. There's cards and flyers in the back. There's an email if you have any questions. Oh, those are my kids. So, all right, and that's basically it.
Question.
In today's news report, they had a reduction in obesity levels from 2008 to 2012, which your slide indicated in New York, but they told in general in the population across the United States.
Really?
As in the latest report from today.
Yeah. So it's a problem actually that the way this problem is going to get fixed is actually the same way that